National polls are continuing to show Biden with a lead over Trump, but in one poll of Florida, Trump is actually leading among Hispanic voters in that state, showing a significant shift for that demographic since 2016. So what does this recovery and other signs in GOP support suggest for the Joe Biden campaign? Team Rising is going to tell us all. Joining us are Democratic strategist Colin O'Hara and Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, friend of the show, Rachel Bovard. Great to see you both.
Good to see you guys.
Good morning.
Great to see you guys.
We miss you here in the studio as always.
Yes.
All right, so Colin, let's start with you. You're in Florida now, as I understand it. Trump is actually winning amongst Hispanics in Florida, something that is not exactly anybody expected. And it's actually the same trend that we see nationally, that he's up by 7% in the Latino vote, more so than he was in 2016. What's going on here, Colin?
Yeah, now, look, we could do an entire segment or show about this alone, but I'm going to summarize if I can for the state of Florida. First of all, I think that's a smaller sample size, so let's just keep it in context. However, in 2016, it's not complicated. Hillary Clinton lost Florida by 100,000 votes, and 1 million voting eligible age Latinos stayed home. So if you want to win the state of Florida, which is basically a Republican +1 or +2 state if it breaks normally, you have to win all the Latino vote. And unless you are completely focusing on turning out, persuading the Latino vote in the state of Florida, and not just in Spanish, but in 2 languages, you're not planning to win. Bill Nelson did the same thing, lost by 10,000 votes, and did not communicate to Latinos nearly enough, whereas, the Republicans started communicating in January to the Latino audience. So, do I think that this poll is 100% accurate? Probably not, because it's a small sample size. However, should Democrats be worried about a trend with Latinos moving to the right? Absolutely 100%. And they need to pay more attention to Latinos and not treat us like we're just a GOTV universe, and understand we are a persuasion universe.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel, let's go ahead and throw up the numbers that we're talking about here. This from Quinnipiac, David Wasserman was tweeting about it. And Colin is right to point out, look, it's a small sample size. All of that, we should just, you never want to rely too much on one poll. And especially, I think it has been particularly hard to get an accurate Latino sample has been sort of a consistent problem for pollsters. But Rachel, as Sagar points out, the area where it's like the one demographic where Trump seems to have actually improved over 2016. And I think a lot of conventional strategists would predict the exact opposite. There was a lot of thinking that in the Trump era, Latinos would become this solid Democratic voting bloc in the way that African Americans have been for years. So what do you think is going on here?
Well, I actually think it's proving the Chuck Rocha thesis, which is that Hispanics, broadly speaking, are not monolithic on a lot of questions, but are really focused on working class issues. And that was what I think Chuck Rocha proved with the Bernie Sanders campaign, which is if you talk to them about working class issues, you can win a lot of the Hispanic vote, because ultimately that's what they care about. And I'm not necessarily saying Donald Trump is better or worse for Hispanics, but what I am saying is that the Biden campaign, I think, isn't doing a good job of that. They're really running on this negative idea of, well, I'm not Donald Trump, and they're doubling down on the issues of identity and immigration, which are compelling issues, I'm sure, for some Hispanics, but I think broadly speaking, don't actually address the kitchen table issues that this voting group cares about.
I think that's absolutely right, Rachel. Now, Colin, let's go to you. What is it exactly, as you said, Biden campaign basically treating the Latino vote for granted. Why have we not seen the same level of outreach to Latino voters that we do to white suburbanites? I mean, Crystal and I basically say that this whole campaign from both sides is all in on, it's like a tug of war over the white suburban vote in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and elsewhere. But as you point out, if you can't win the entire Latino vote in Florida, it's game over. And we don't really see the Biden campaign investing in this, do we?
Here's what I would say. I would say both campaigns are hyper-focused on Karen and forgetting about Carlos. And that's a huge problem. I think the reality of it is the people who run these campaigns are largely older white voters who are used to, in the state of Florida, trying to win the I-4 corridor. The state has fundamentally changed. It doesn't work that way anymore. That is not where the majority of the vote is. And Rachel is absolutely right. Look, immigration is an issue for Latinos. However, addressing the Latinos as a monolithic bloc is wrong, because especially in a state like Florida, which is multi-subcultural, a lot of people are Cuban, Colombian, Spanish, etc. first, then Latino second, or then American second, and then Latino third, or reverse that order, but it's a self-country of origin identification before Latinos, okay? What that means is that this is a largely aspirational universe. It's why my people came here, it's why most people came here. It's to improve their way of life. And these are the things that you need to fundamentally talk about. It's not an immigration issue, although that is important. It's not solely based on that. People are all here for largely the same reasons. They want opportunity to improve the lives and the lives of their children. Tell us how you're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel, it reminds me that, in the George W. Bush era, this was actually an affirmative project within the Republican Party. The idea was, look, a lot of Latinos are actually culturally conservative. And this is, as Colin put it very well, this is an aspirational community, and there could be a message that lands with this group. Trump has improved over Mitt Romney's performance. He did better than, Mitt Romney even in 2016. He seems to be on track to even outperform that performance this time around. But it sure seems like he could be doing a lot more here as well to affirmatively make a case for Latinos. How do you see that question?
Yeah, I think that they haven't picked up the ball where I think they have a lot of opportunity to do so. I do think, though, they are making a more affirmative jobs argument than the Biden campaign is, although I think both campaigns are really struggling right now because everything is so events driven. The campaigns are just being, forced to respond to sort of major events happening in the country and aren't necessarily able to make, I think, the jobs argument that would be compelling to these different groups. But, I think if you just look at the two different conventions, I was actually really impressed by the Republican message doubling down on sort of letting the working class voter make the case for Trump instead of bringing in celebrities and the razzle dazzle and all this stuff. And I think that message, if they're able to communicate it outside of the convention and on the campaign trail and in the states where that really resonates, I think can only help them, with Hispanics, but with working class voters beyond that.
Yeah, I think
Colin,
that's right.
Last question to you. What does this mean if this trend sort of continues and Democrats continue to not specifically speak to this group of people, which has been touted as like part of the coalition of the ascendant and just assumed to be future Democrats from here to eternity? Like, what are the consequences for the Democratic coalition long term?
Well, first of all, I think that's a miscalculation that any group is particularly part of a Democratic or Republican coalition. I think that's a wrong assumption. I think as we move into the future, we're moving away from Democrat and Republican labels and moving toward an issue-based argument for anyone in this country. And I think if they choose to continue to ignore the Latino vote, what they've essentially said is that they're going to continue to lose in the future, or they're going to aim to lose in the future. Republicans know they don't have to win all the Latino vote. They only have to siphon away a few points from the Latino portion of the electorate or from the African-American portion of the electorate to cause real problems for Democrats. We win via this coalition. And if you pull 5 points here and 6 points here, you've lost the election by 2 points. So you have to, really struggle to make sure that you maintain the group interests of all of these groups in the forefront, and you're continuing to communicate to them and persuade them on a regular basis.
Yep, I think very well said.
Great insights from both of you. Thank you very much. And we're going to have more Team Rising for you after this.